Daniel was a young man who had lived on the outer colony station for almost 3 years. Life there was calm but also a little lonely. He worked as a technician, repairing small machines and helping keep the station's systems in order. Most days were quiet, filled with the sound of humming engines and blinking panels. He never expected his life to change in a sudden and unusual way. One morning, he received a message from the station's administration. The subject line read, "Cultural Exchange Assignment." Daniel frowned as he read further. The message explained that as part of a peace program between humans and a warrior alien species called the Velaryi, certain colonists would be paired with alien assistants. The purpose was to build trust and learn about each other's customs. To his surprise, Daniel had been selected. His assigned partner would arrive that very evening. Daniel spent the day wondering what kind of alien would show up. He had only seen a few Velaryi in the station before, tall figures with sharp features and a dignified presence. They were known for being disciplined and proud. The idea of one of them becoming his assistant, or as the message described, his maid, felt strange. He tried to imagine how that would even work but gave up when the possibilities became too confusing. When evening came, the door to his quarters slid open, and Daniel saw her for the first time. The alien stepped in with perfect posture. She was tall, nearly a head above him, with silver eyes and long dark hair tied neatly behind her. Her uniform looked like a mix between ceremonial armor and formal clothing. She placed her hand across her chest in a salute and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I am Lyra of the Velaryi. I have been assigned as your maid. From this moment, your home is my duty and your well-being is my honor." Daniel blinked. He had expected someone carrying cleaning supplies or maybe a box of tools. Instead, he was faced with what looked like a warrior announcing her oath of loyalty. Hello," Daniel said awkwardly. "I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you. You don't have to be so formal. This is just my small living space, not a palace." Lyra's silver eyes narrowed slightly, as if testing his words. "Every dwelling of my assigned human is sacred. No matter its size, it deserves respect. I will maintain it with the discipline of my people." Before Daniel could respond, she began walking around his quarters with careful attention. She studied every corner, every piece of furniture, and every object on the shelf. She touched nothing but memorized everything with sharp precision. Then she turned back to him. "Your bed is not aligned to the wall correctly. It wastes space. The tools on your table are scattered, which lowers efficiency. Meals appear unplanned. This will be corrected." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had expected help, but this was something else entirely. It felt as though a commander had taken charge of his tiny room. Lyra moved with determination. She straightened the bed until the sheets were perfectly tight. She stacked his tools in rows by size. She even opened his food cabinet and began making notes in a small device she carried. "You consume too much preserved food. Fresh nutrition must be arranged," she announced firmly. Daniel scratched his head. "I thought being a maid meant light cleaning or maybe organizing a bit. You're treating this like a mission." "To serve is the greatest mission," Lyra replied without hesitation. "Do not fear. I will not fail in my role." As the evening passed, Daniel watched in a mix of awe and confusion. Lyra moved silently but with purpose, turning his messy quarters into a place of order. She stood guard near the door whenever he left the room, and when he returned, she was already waiting, as if she had sworn to protect the space itself. Neighbors passing by peeked curiously at the unusual sight. A proud Villery warrior acting as a personal maid to an ordinary human technician was not something they saw every day. Daniel could hear whispers in the corridor but tried to ignore them. Later that night, Daniel finally sat down while Lyra stood at attention near him. He sighed softly. "Lyra, I appreciate your help. Really, I do. But you don't need to be so intense. I'm just a normal guy living in a small place." Lyra tilted her head. "A normal human is still worthy of honor. Do not mistake simplicity for weakness. My oath is clear. Until my service ends, I belong to this duty." Daniel had no answer for that. He simply leaned back in his chair, wondering what kind of adventure he had just stepped into. For the first time in years, his life no longer felt quiet. It felt unpredictable. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He rubbed his eyes and noticed that his quarters felt strangely different. Everything was neat, almost too neat. His shoes were perfectly aligned near the door, his table was spotless, and his tools were arranged as if they belonged in a showroom. Even the air smelled faintly of herbs, something he was sure he had not placed there. Then he saw Lyra standing silently near the doorway, her posture tall and unwavering. "Good morning, Daniel," she said in her calm, steady voice. "I have prepared your daily schedule." "My what?" Daniel asked, still half asleep. Lyra handed him a small data pad. On the screen was a complete timetable: wake up at 0600, eat breakfast at 0615, begin work at 0700, return at 1700, exercise at 1800, rest at 2000, sleep at 2200. Every task was written with precision, even reminders to drink water at regular intervals. Daniel blinked at the screen. "This looks more like military training than normal life." "Order brings strength," Lyra replied firmly. "A dwelling without structure will fall into chaos. I will not allow my human to live in disorder." Daniel sighed, but he could see she meant every word. He decided not to argue, at least not before breakfast. To his surprise, Lyra had already prepared food. On the table sat two plates, one with simple human breakfast items and another with something more unusual: steamed green slices that gave off a spicy aroma. "I studied your supplies," Lyra explained. "Half of them were inefficient. I combined what you had with a few Villery rations. This will strengthen your body." Daniel tried a bite of the green slice. The taste was sharp, almost burning, but not unpleasant. He coughed once and reached for water. Lyra watched him carefully, then gave a small nod. "You endure well. That is good." Throughout the day, Lyra followed her new system with unshakable focus. She polished every surface, sharpened Daniel's tools, and even inspected the locks on the doors. At one point, she stood in the hallway, blocking a neighbor who had come by to chat. "This area is secured," Lyra declared. "State your purpose." The neighbor, a young mechanic named Juno, raised both hands nervously. "I just wanted to see if Daniel was free." Daniel quickly stepped in. "It's all right, Lyra. Juno's a friend." Lyra gave Juno a sharp glance, then slowly stepped aside. "Friends are permitted. But all others will require approval." Juno whispered to Daniel as they went inside, "You weren't joking. She really is acting like your guard." Daniel shrugged helplessly. "I thought she was just supposed to help with chores. But she takes everything way too seriously." Later, when Daniel tried to relax with a book, Lyra stood behind him silently, as if watching over him. When he shifted uncomfortably and asked if she needed to sit, she shook her head. "My duty is to remain alert while you rest," she explained. Daniel chuckled weakly. "Most people think of maids as helpers, not bodyguards." "In my culture," Lyra said, her voice carrying quiet pride, "to serve is to protect. A careless maid brings shame to the household. A devoted maid brings honor. I will bring you honor." Her words carried such seriousness that Daniel didn't know how to respond. He simply returned to his book, though he could feel her watchful presence behind him. By the second evening, the whole station had begun to notice the unusual pair. People whispered when Lyra marched beside Daniel in the corridors, always half a step behind him like a soldier shadowing her commander. Some found it amusing, others found it puzzling, but all agreed it was not something seen every day. Daniel tried several times to tell Lyra she was overdoing it, but she misunderstood each attempt. When he said, "You don't have to follow me everywhere," she replied, "Correct, I must walk slightly behind to guard your back." When he said, "You don't need to plan every meal," she answered, "Correct, I will plan every second meal to avoid burdening you." It became clear to Daniel that she was interpreting his words as secret tests, not instructions. To her, any hint of relaxation was simply his human way of checking her loyalty. That night, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Lyra had insisted on sitting in a chair near the door, wide awake, watching the entrance like a sentinel. He whispered to himself, "How am I supposed to live like this?" Yet even as he wondered, he couldn't deny a strange sense of safety. For the first time since coming to the station, he felt certain that nothing could reach him without first passing through the unshakable guard named Lyra. And deep inside, though he would never admit it out loud, that feeling brought him comfort. Days passed, and Daniel slowly learned what it meant to live with Lyra. Every morning she inspected his quarters as if preparing for a royal visit. Every evening she reviewed his schedule, adjusting small details with the seriousness of a commander. Daniel often tried to lighten the mood, but Lyra rarely smiled. She believed every task was sacred, even simple chores like folding clothes or boiling water. One afternoon, Daniel decided to take a break and walk through the station's market district. The market was busy, filled with vendors selling food, tools, and small decorations. The smell of cooked meals drifted through the air, and voices of many species blended into a constant hum. Lyra walked close behind him, scanning the area as if danger might appear at any moment. Daniel stopped at a merchant's stall to buy a replacement part for one of his repair tools. The merchant, noticing Lyra's tall figure and stern expression, raised his prices without hesitation. "That will be 30 credits, the merchant said, smirking slightly. Daniel frowned. 30? It was 15 last week. Before he could say more, Lyra stepped forward. Her silver eyes glared at the merchant, and her voice carried sharp authority. "You dare cheat my human? This is dishonor." The merchant stammered, taken aback by her intensity. I just thought with extra demand." Lyra's hand moved to the hilt of the ceremonial blade at her side. She did not draw it, but the gesture alone was enough to silence the entire row of nearby vendors. In Villery law, deceit is a wound upon trust. Such wounds demand correction. Daniel's heart raced. He quickly placed a hand on her arm. "Lyra, stop. It's fine. I don't need the part that badly." She turned to him, her voice softening slightly but still firm. "No, Daniel. It is not fine. To let such dishonor pass is weakness." The merchant's face grew pale. He lowered the price immediately, not to 15 but to 10 credits, begging Daniel to take the part and leave. Daniel paid quickly, tugging Lyra away before the scene grew larger. When they were finally alone in a quieter corridor, Daniel sighed heavily. Lyra, you can't act like that here. This isn't your home world. People don't solve problems with threats. They negotiate. Lyra's eyes flashed with confusion. He tried to take advantage of you. Why should we allow such insult? Where I come from, loyalty demands protection. Daniel shook his head. I know you meant well, but here, shouting or drawing a blade makes things worse. We handle conflict with words, not weapons. If you keep acting this way, you'll cause trouble for both of us. Lyra grew silent, her proud expression faltering for the first time. She looked down, as if trying to process his words. Your customs are strange. To accept insult feels like surrender. Yet you speak with calm even when wronged. Perhaps this is the human way. Daniel smiled faintly. It's not about surrender. It's about finding peace without creating bigger problems. Sometimes walking away is stronger than fighting. The two walked on, the tension between them heavy but also filled with unspoken understanding. Lyra did not argue further, though Daniel could tell she struggled with the idea. To her, honor was not just tradition, it was identity. Later that evening, while Daniel worked on his machines, Lyra sat quietly nearby. For once she did not correct his posture or adjust his tools. Instead, she asked a question, her voice softer than usual. Daniel, in your culture, what does it mean to serve? To you, what is a maid? Daniel thought for a moment. A maid is someone who helps with everyday things. Cleaning, cooking, keeping things in order. But it's not about honor or battle. It's just support, nothing more. Lyra tilted her head, her silver eyes studying him. Support is not nothing. Support is the ground that holds the warrior's step. Still, I see now that our meanings are different. For the first time, Daniel felt she was beginning to listen. Their worlds were far apart, yet here they were, sitting in the same small room, trying to understand each other. The clash of cultures was not over, but a bridge had begun to form. And Daniel realized that as difficult as Lyra's seriousness could be, her loyalty was genuine, and her respect was something he did not want to lose. Days turned into a week, and Daniel began to notice changes not in Lyra, but in himself. Living with a Velari warrior was no longer just strange or exhausting. It was, surprisingly comforting. Her constant presence, which had first felt overwhelming, was now a quiet reassurance. One morning, Daniel woke to find Lyra already preparing breakfast. The aroma was unfamiliar yet strangely pleasant. On the table were neatly arranged plates, one with the usual human foods and another with an alien dish that steamed gently. He poked at it cautiously. Try it, Lyra said, her silver eyes bright with anticipation. It strengthens the body and mind. Daniel took a small bite. The taste was spicy and tangy, very different from anything he had eaten before. He coughed lightly, and Lyra handed him a glass of water without a word. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a small, almost shy curve of her lips. You survived, she said simply. Daniel laughed. Barely. But it's not bad, actually. This small exchange felt like a breakthrough. Lyra had never shown that kind of emotion before. It was subtle, but Daniel felt that behind her seriousness, there was a genuine desire to connect. Throughout the day, Lyra continued her routines, but now there were small moments of humor. She tried to mimic human gestures, like stretching dramatically after a long task, only to knock over a stack of books. Daniel ducked in time, laughing loudly. "You are clumsy," he teased gently. "I am learning human efficiency," she replied, though a hint of embarrassment colored her voice. "This task requires practice." Even her warrior demeanor could not prevent her from looking slightly sheepish, and Daniel found himself grinning more often than not. In the afternoon, Daniel decided to show Lyra one of his hobbies, repairing a small hover drone. He worked slowly, explaining the components and demonstrating the careful assembly of wires and circuits. Lyra observed silently at first, her eyes sharp and focused. Then, carefully, she picked up a tool and imitated his movements. "Your technique is precise," she commented, after successfully connecting a delicate wire. Daniel smiled proudly. "You did it perfectly. That's amazing for your first try." She nodded, a flicker of pride crossing her features. "I see now that tasks can be mastered through patience, not only through strength." That evening, Daniel invited her to join him for a short walk outside the station. The colony's observation deck overlooked the endless stars, with distant planets glowing softly in the darkness. Lyra stood silently beside him, her tall form outlined against the window. "It is beautiful," she said, voice quiet, almost contemplative. "Your world is full of wonders I have not known." Daniel smiled. "It is, isn't it? I never noticed it before. But sometimes, having someone to share it with makes it even better." Lyra glanced at him, then back at the stars. "Perhaps humans find value in companionship differently than Villery. I am beginning to understand." On the way back to his quarters, a minor problem arose. One of Daniel's tools malfunctioned, spilling sparks across the floor. Lyra reacted instantly, catching the falling device with ease. "Your safety is my responsibility," she said calmly. Daniel looked at her, a mixture of awe and gratitude filling his chest. "I guess some parts of your seriousness are actually, really helpful." Lyra studied him for a moment. "It seems that our strengths can complement each other. You are clever, and I am vigilant. Together, we are stronger." That night, Daniel lay in bed thinking about how much had changed. Living with Lyra was no longer a source of stress or confusion. It had become an unexpected adventure filled with learning, laughter, and trust. He realized that the warrior alien who had once been overwhelming was now a friend and protector in ways he had never imagined. Lyra, standing silently near his door, glanced at him with quiet satisfaction. For the first time, she felt a small warmth in her duty and understanding that serving Daniel was more than order and protection. It was partnership. And as Daniel drifted to sleep, he knew that their strange, overzealous routine had grown into something far more meaningful. They were learning from each other, not just about chores or schedules, but about respect, trust, and the quiet joy of companionship. It was late evening when the calm of the colony station was shattered by an unexpected alarm. Red lights flashed across the corridors, and a loud siren echoed through every room. Daniel jumped from his chair, heart racing. "What is happening?" he shouted over the noise. Lyra was already on her feet, moving with swift precision. "Stay close to me. This is a security breach," she said, her voice calm but firm. Daniel followed her as she led him to a central corridor. He could see a group of station workers and residents running toward the control center, panic written on every face. Lyra positioned herself between him and the crowd, her tall frame radiating a protective authority. "What kind of breach?" Daniel asked, trying to stay steady. "Unknown intruders," Lyra replied. "They intend to enter human quarters. We must protect this area." Daniel watched as Lyra moved gracefully, almost like a shadow. Her eyes scanned every corner, calculating angles, noticing weaknesses. Even though he felt anxious, he realized he could trust her instincts completely. The alarm continued, and soon a warning came over the station speakers. "Intruders detected near Sector 7. All personnel proceed to secure positions." Daniel took a deep breath. "I guess this is what you meant when you said you would protect me." Lyra gave a small nod. "Protection is not optional. It is duty." Together, they reached Sector 7, where the doors had been forced slightly open. Lyra gestured for Daniel to stay behind her. She inspected the area carefully before moving forward. When a shadow moved near a supply crate, she reacted instantly, grabbing a nearby tool and using it to block the intruder's path without striking. Daniel watched in awe. The intruders, surprised by her sudden appearance and confidence, hesitated. That moment gave Daniel a chance to act. Using his quick thinking, he activated a nearby control panel, sending a pulse that temporarily disabled the intruder's tools and lights. The area became a maze of shadows and flickering systems. Lyra seized the moment. With precision and calm, she guided Daniel to a safer corner and directed the station security team to surround the intruders. Within minutes, the threat was contained, and the intruders were detained. Daniel exhaled slowly, his adrenaline still high. That was incredible. I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that. Lyra glanced at him, her expression serious but with a trace of pride. "I told you. Duty is not simply about chores or schedules. Protection is also part of service. I would not allow harm to reach you." Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. "And you saved me. Not just physically, but, I don't know, emotionally too. I felt safe even when everything was chaos." Lyra's eyes softened slightly. "Then my service is complete. Protection is both physical and mental. I have fulfilled my duty." Later, as the station returned to normal, Daniel and Lyra walked through the now quiet corridors. Residents whispered and glanced at them, clearly impressed by the teamwork they had witnessed. Some even approached Daniel to comment on his unusual companion. "You work with her every day?" one engineer asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes. She's special." Lyra, standing tall beside him, added, "Every human deserves respect and safety. My service ensures that." Daniel chuckled softly. "I never thought having a maid could be like this." That evening, back in his quarters, Daniel sat down, still feeling the adrenaline of the incident. Lyra cleaned and organized as usual, but her movements were slower now, less rigid. She even asked him about his condition. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No, thanks to you," Daniel said honestly. "I think I've learned a lot today." "You're amazing, Lyra." She nodded, accepting the compliment without pride. "It is only my duty. Yet, I am pleased that my actions are valued by you." Daniel smiled. For the first time, he realized that living with Lyra was no longer just about following rules or surviving her strict routines. It was about trust, teamwork, and learning from each other. As he lay in bed that night, he reflected on the events of the day. Lyra's seriousness, once overwhelming, had become a source of strength. He finally understood that her devotion was not a burden but a gift. And somewhere in the quiet corner of the room, Lyra watched over him, vigilant yet gentle. She had proven that serving someone was more than chores. It was about loyalty, courage, and standing together through challenges. The day after the station incident, life began to return to normal, or as normal as it could be with Lyra around. Daniel found that the calm moments between chaos were becoming the most meaningful. The events of the previous night had changed something in both of them. Lyra's seriousness had shifted from rigid discipline to a sense of quiet confidence, while Daniel felt a newfound respect for her abilities. As Daniel worked on repairing the station's energy conduit, Lyra stood nearby, quietly observing his movements. She no longer hovered over him as if he might fail at any moment. Instead, she offered subtle advice and gentle corrections when necessary. "You are over-tightening this joint," she said softly. "It may cause stress on the circuit." Daniel nodded, appreciating her input. "Thanks, Lyra. I might have overlooked that." Her silver eyes met his for a brief moment, and for the first time, Daniel felt a sense of equality rather than hierarchy. Their teamwork was becoming fluid, natural. Word of their actions against the intruders had already spread through the station. Other humans and aliens alike were curious about the unusual pair: a human who relied on his instincts and quick thinking, and a Velari warrior who combined discipline with unmatched loyalty. Several visitors came by Daniel's quarters, not to question him, but to observe how Lyra interacted with him. One of the station leaders approached Daniel with a small smile. "We've heard of your partnership with Lyra," he said. "It seems she has not only served her role but enhanced your performance as well. This is impressive." Daniel glanced at Lyra, who stood tall and silent, as always. "She's incredible," he replied. "She taught me more in a few days than I could have learned in months alone." Lyra, overhearing, bowed slightly in acknowledgement. "Your skills are commendable as well. Together, we achieve more than separately." The leader nodded. "Your teamwork is a model for others. Humans and Velari rarely collaborate this closely. You have shown that cooperation can strengthen both species." Daniel felt a surge of pride. He realized that Lyra's intensity, once overwhelming, had a deeper purpose. It was not about controlling him or his life. It was about bringing out the best in both of them. Later that evening, Daniel and Lyra shared a quiet moment in his quarters. He watched her carefully arrange a few tools, noting how her movements were precise yet calm. "Lyra," Daniel began, hesitating slightly, "I think I understand now. You were serious before because you wanted to protect and help me. But you also taught me how to be better at thinking and acting in difficult situations." Lyra paused, her head tilting slightly. "Your understanding is correct. Service is not only about tasks. It is about improving the well-being and abilities of the one you serve. My duty is complete when you are strengthened." Daniel smiled warmly. "Then you've succeeded. I feel stronger, safer, and more confident, because of you." For a moment, Lyra's normally calm demeanor softened. She looked at him with a quiet sense of satisfaction, as if seeing the results of her dedication gave her purpose beyond mere duty. Over the next few days, their relationship grew even stronger. Lyra began to ask questions about human customs and habits, eager to understand the subtleties of his world. Daniel, in turn, shared small stories about life on the station, laughing at the moments he used to face alone. One afternoon, while they worked together repairing a supply drone, Daniel noticed a slight smile tugging at the corner of Lyra's lips. "That is progress," he remarked lightly. Lyra's eyes met his, and she nodded. Yes. Understanding each other brings strength. Not just physical strength, but strength of trust and loyalty. By the end of the week, the station residents had noticed the change in both of them. The odd human and his disciplined Villery maid were no longer a curiosity. They were respected, admired, and even considered a symbol of successful interspecies cooperation. As Daniel prepared for bed that night, he reflected on the past few days. Lyra's intensity had shifted from strict duty to a partnership built on mutual respect. He realized that her loyalty was not about control, it was about recognition, trust, and support. Lyra stood silently by the door, watching over him as usual, yet her presence no longer felt like oversight. Instead, it was a quiet reassurance, a reminder that they were stronger together. Daniel closed his eyes, finally understanding what he had always sensed. Lyra's strength was not just in her skill or discipline, but in the trust and care she brought to their bond. Together, they had grown into a team that neither human nor Villery alone could achieve. The days following the station incident were calm, yet Daniel could feel that something had changed, not in the station, but in his relationship with Lyra. Their partnership had grown beyond routines, chores, and schedules. It had become trust, understanding, and mutual respect. One morning, Daniel noticed that Lyra moved differently around the quarters. She still polished surfaces and arranged tools with precision, but there was now a fluidity in her actions. It was as if her previous rigidity had softened into something natural. Daniel watched her carefully, feeling a sense of pride. "Lyra," he said quietly, "I think you've changed." Lyra paused and looked at him. "Have I? Or have we changed together?" Daniel smiled. "Maybe both. You used to follow every rule strictly, but now it feels like you understand me too. Not just what I do, but who I am." Lyra's silver eyes met his, calm and clear. "Then my service is not only to the tasks, but also to the bond we share. I see now that loyalty and support are stronger when understanding is present." Later that day, the station held a small gathering to honor the teamwork displayed during the security breach. Daniel and Lyra were invited to the central hall, where humans and Villery alike congratulated them. A fellow human engineer approached Daniel, shaking his head in amazement. "I have never seen anyone handle a situation like that. You two were like one mind. I can't believe she's your maid." Daniel chuckled. "She is, well, that title doesn't really cover it anymore." Lyra, standing tall beside him, spoke clearly. "Titles are not as important as purpose. I am called a maid, but my role is much more than simple service. It is protection, trust, and partnership." Several Villery officials nodded in approval, recognizing her words as a display of honor. Even the human leader smiled, impressed by her ability to redefine what service meant. As the crowd dispersed, Daniel and Lyra walked back to his quarters. The stars outside the station glimmered faintly, casting soft light across the observation deck. "You know," Daniel said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I think I finally understand what being your human means to you." Lyra tilted her head. "And what is that?" "You trusted me," he said simply. "You took your duties seriously because you cared about me, and I learned to trust you back. That's more than a maid's duty. That's partnership." Lyra's expression softened, and she took a small step closer. "Then we have succeeded. The title remains, but the meaning has grown. I am your maid, yes, but also your guardian and companion. Your strengths and mine are joined." Daniel laughed softly, feeling a warmth in his chest. It feels right. I never expected a simple assignment would turn into something like this. The next few days were filled with a new rhythm. Lyra continued her duties, but they were no longer burdensome for Daniel. Cooking, cleaning, arranging tools, and even training exercises became moments of shared learning and quiet enjoyment. Residents who saw them together began to admire the unusual bond. Humans and Villery started to understand that cooperation and respect could create something extraordinary. One evening, as Daniel prepared for bed, he noticed Lyra standing silently by the door, her usual alert stance. "You still stand there every night," he said with a grin. "I am your guardian," she replied. "Even in rest, vigilance is necessary." Daniel shook his head, smiling. "I know. But I also know that you are more than that. You're my friend, my partner. I trust you completely." Lyra's silver eyes glimmered faintly. "Then our journey is complete. Not in distance, but in understanding. I have learned that serving is more than obedience. It is loyalty, trust, and respect shared equally." Daniel closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, feeling safe and grateful. His life, once quiet and predictable, had grown into something extraordinary. The alien maid who had arrived with seriousness and precision had become a symbol of partnership and loyalty. And standing quietly nearby, Lyra felt it too. Her oath of service had transformed into a bond of equality, respect, and trust. Together, they faced the future not as master and maid, but as partners ready for whatever the galaxy might bring. The stars outside twinkled softly, a quiet reminder that even the most unexpected assignments could change lives forever.